While scrolling through my Instagram feed earlier, I came across this palette here. Now, I wasn't really that interested in picking it up. The color story is something I feel like I could make pretty easily, and I'm not a huge fan of these very ornate packaging style palettes. I do prefer something that's a little bit more easy to store, a little bit more minimalist. But it was pretty, and it seemed like it was a new brand, so I thought I would go on their website and check them out. That is when I discovered that this palette costs $560 Canadian. At the time of making this video, that makes it about $450 US. That is just egregious. That is offensive. That is such a blatant ripoff. I mean, that packaging would have to be made of solid gold to be worth it, and it's not. And even then, it's just a little ridiculous. So I thought I would do a video just to show how really easy it is to dupe the color story in case that was something you were interested in, and just to remind people that this is a ripoff. This is such a ripoff. Now, of course, people probably aren't buying this for the color story, they're buying it for the packaging, but even then, that price is outrageous. If you go on Etsy, you will find dozens of shops that sell custom palettes. Sometimes they're ones they have pre-made, but they also often have commissions where you can contact them and tell them what you want in a palette and they will make it for you. And though I haven't really looked into that too much, I can tell you from what I've seen that none of them are costing $500 unless maybe you wanted like real diamonds in it or something. So if you are looking at this and being like, oh my God, that's so expensive, but I think it's so cool, you definitely can find a version of this tailored to what you would like for a significantly lower price. And of course, you could look into making your own palette. I did that once. It was a very basic palette, and I think it only cost me like $25, $25, $30 Canadian to make. So it's definitely something that the more material you put into it, the more it's going to be, but it's certainly not going to be $500. Anyways, on to the shadows. The first shadow that I have is Royal Vault from Shine by SD. This is a turquoise, blue, indigo, and purple shifting iridescent with a golden sparkle. The shadow in the palette appears to be a marbled iridescent, and the marbling seems to be a turquoise, blue, indigo, purple, and then a gold, green, blue. This is basically the same effect that it seems to give swirled together. Next is ColourPop Lost and Found. This is a mid-tone blue matte, pretty straightforward. Next up is It's a Hit from Glam Shop. It has a purple base and shifts gold, yellow, green, and turquoise. There are two shadows in this palette that it was kind of hard to tell what they were. They were either a little bit more warm or a little bit more cool, and it really depended on the swatches, which there wasn't a lot of available. So I did go with this one, but I also had a lot of options that were much more cool toned than this. So either way, it's pretty easy to do. Following that, I have No Other from Shine by SD. This has a cool gray base and shifts peach, orange, gold, yellow, and chartreuse. Now this is definitely more interesting than the shadow in the palette. It is super, super sparkly, and the base of the one in the palette is much more of a kind of warm brown, like a peachy brown. However, the shadow that I would have used for that, Praise for Your Face Fairy Godmother, is in another palette, which was not with me when I was duping this. Next is Queen of Orange from Glam Shop. It's a super vibrant neon orange. In fact, it is such a vibrant neon orange that you might have noticed that my camera settings switched between this clip and the last one. And that's because my camera just doesn't know what to do with this super vibrant shadow against my just very desaturated coloring. This was a depot, but is also available as a single. This whole palette, I believe it was called Neons or something like that. They're available as singles if you just want to get one specific shadow, but they are a very high quality neon shadow. And they don't cost $500. Next is Line of Queens from Cleona. It has a purple base and shifts peach, orange, gold, yellow, lime, and green. Similar to the shadow that I duped with It's a Hit, this one could look quite different in different photos. I originally was looking at using Glam Rush from Shine by SD, and if you know what that shadow looks like, you can kind of imagine how very different the shadow would look in different images, but I did go with this one in the end. Really though, it's a pretty common shadow either way, depending if you wanted to go with the one that was more similar to Glam Rush or the one that was more similar to this one. Very easy to do. Next is Torch from Shine by SD. This is a very soft pink, peach, gold, yellow, green, and teal iridescent. This is an absolutely beautiful and delicate shadow. It has that diffused sparkle and a relatively small particle size. And it looks pretty similar to the one that's in the palette. It is definitely more of a subtle kind of highlighting shadow. Following that is Indigo from Glam Shop. This is a deep, cool purple matte. Again, a pretty common shadow, not much to say about it. And then I have Top Notch from Shine by SD. This is a black base jeweled multichrome that shifts purple, pink, peach, orange, gold, yellow, and lime. This kind of jeweled multichrome, every brand has a version of. I do personally think that these Shine by SD ones are the best ones you can get. They're the only ones that don't crease on me, but color-wise, everyone has one of these. Next is Distance from Shine by SD. This is another one of their Jeweled Dream Black Base Jeweled Multichromes, and it shifts gold, olive, green, teal, turquoise, and blue. Just like the last one, this is a pretty common type of shadow. Every brand has a version of it. There's nothing really all that special about including a shadow like this in that palette. Next up is Dandelion Sage, which is a desaturated deep forest green matte. This is the only one that I wasn't super confident about my choice in. I don't have a ton of vibrant deep greens, but that's really just a personal preference, and I didn't go into any of my palettes with magnetic pans where I do believe I have a couple of these. And lastly is Vibration from Shine by SD. This is another one of their jeweled black base multichromes, and it shifts teal, turquoise, blue, indigo, purple, and violet. Next to the magenta, pink, peach, gold, green multichromes with a black base, this is probably the most common multichrome shadow that you will find. Don't get me wrong, I love these kind of shadows. I think they are so beautiful. I think they're flattering on everybody. I love to use them as just like a bold liner, something just to bring that really fun, bright, bold color. But for a $500 palette, I think including just a basic version of this kind of shadow is ridiculous. And here's the palette all swatched out together. I do think this is a beautiful collection of shadows, but I don't really think it's a great palette. It would be difficult to create looks with this palette. Most of these shadows, the mattes, you can't really blend together. You can do a little bit, but you're going to be really limited in the looks you're getting. I personally feel like if I'm spending the money to get a palette that is so ornate and so bulky, it has to be the shadows I'm wearing every single day. And this is just not that. These are more like a collection of shadows that I will pull in as a companion. And on top of that, these just aren't special shadows. They're all very generic shadows that it's easy to do. Anyways, what do you think? Do you think this is worth $500? I personally am maybe a little biased because I don't have $500 to spend on an eyeshadow palette. But if you do, what do you think? Would this be worth it to you? Anyways, thank you for watching. Make responsible purchasing decisions. I usually don't, but thankfully I'm responsible enough to not spend $500 on an eyeshadow palette, or at least not this eyeshadow palette. Have a great day. Bye.